Welcome to the Explainer. When you open up your closet in the morning, you probably aren't thinking you're looking at this ancient, world-changing survival tool. But you absolutely are. It's funny, pretty much everyone assumes the exact same thing about why we started wearing clothes in the first place. It's modesty, right? Just covering up, being decent, protecting our dignity. It's what we've all been taught. Society, history classes, our cultural norms, they all push this idea that humanity just kind of woke up one day, felt super embarrassed about being naked, and, threw on a fig leaf. But here's the problem. Scientifically and historically, that is not even close to the real answer. The actual story is wildly different. We're talking about head lice, a massive, literally planet-altering ice age. And, maybe the craziest part, a completely different species of human. Not Homo sapiens, a species that actually invented complex sewing way before we ever did. So buckle up, get comfortable, and let's dive into this. Because this one, it gets weird fast. Okay, let's start with something nobody really thinks about on a daily basis. Humans lost their body hair a long, long time ago. Now, you might be wondering, how do we actually know that? Well, it all comes down to genetic research on skin pigmentation. See, when our ancestors lost their thick body fur, their bare skin was suddenly exposed to the intense African sun. To survive, dark pigmentation evolved to protect that newly bare skin from all those harsh UV rays. And by tracking the genetics of that pigmentation, scientists can estimate exactly when we lost our fur. It puts the date at roughly 1 million years ago, maybe even more. So here is the massive timeline problem that researchers ran into. If we lost our fur 1 million years ago, and clothing is, a relatively modern invention in the grand scheme of human history, what exactly were we doing in between? Seriously, think about it. That is an enormous 800,000-year gap. What were humans doing for all that time? Well, the honest answer, we were just walking around naked, literally for hundreds of thousands of years. No fur, no clothes, just bare skin, surviving in the African heat. It's a genuinely strange image once you actually picture it, right? But it made total evolutionary sense. Our ancestors developed the ability to cool down by sweating across bare skin, rather than panting like a dog, which basically meant the heavy fur had to go. We were perfectly adapted, naked endurance runners. So, if we were happily naked for almost 1 million years, how do scientists even figure out when clothing actually started? Organic materials rot away, right? It's not like there's a first shirt fossil sitting in a glass case in some museum. The trail should be completely dead. Well, the answer doesn't come from ancient fabric. It doesn't come from fossilized leather or preserved hides. The answer, weirdly enough, comes from lice. And here is the fascinating biological twist. Head lice and body lice are actually the exact same species of insect, but there's one crucial difference. Body lice physically cannot lay their eggs on bare, hairless skin. They evolved specifically to cling to and survive in the woven fibers of fabric. So logically, at some point in our evolutionary history, a totally new kind of lice had to branch off and evolve specifically to live in our clothes. By looking at the DNA of these insects, researchers can actually measure the mutation rates, basically using it as a sort of molecular clock. Tracking this DNA split between head lice and body lice allowed researchers to estimate exactly when clothing became a regular human habit. And the data places it somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago, depending on which study you trust. So somewhere out there, a tiny, super annoying parasite accidentally became one of history's most useful and accurate detectives. And the timing of this invention, it isn't random at all. If you look at the climate history of the Earth, that 170,000-year window lines up almost exactly with the onset of a brutal, truly unforgiving ice age. And this is where the story shifts entirely to pure survival. See, clothing wasn't invented to look good, and it definitely wasn't invented to hide our bodies. It was invented because the planet got dangerously, brutally cold, and a hairless, exposed species desperately needed a way to survive weather it was simply never built for. We really need to remember that clothing isn't just fabric, it is a profound piece of human technology. In fact, researchers believe clothing is one of the foundational key technologies that allowed humans to migrate out of Africa into the colder, freezing regions of the globe. Honestly, without this technological leap, we simply don't leave the continent. So we have the lice, and we have the ice. It paints a pretty clear picture of our ancestors triumphing over the elements, right? But here is the part of the story that breaks people's brains a little bit. We weren't the first ones to do it. The oldest known sewing needle ever discovered is this tiny, delicate bird bone needle dating back 50,000 years. And what makes it so remarkable is that it has a deliberately drilled eye for thread. This is hugely important. It means early humans weren't just lazily draping animal hides over their shoulders, they were actively threading needles to create incredibly tight, windproof seams. But the true kicker? It was found in Denisova Cave in Siberia, and it wasn't made by us.
Yeah, most archaeological evidence points to that needle being crafted by Denisovans, a now extinct relative of modern humans. You see, Denisovans lived in incredibly harsh, freezing climates long before Homo sapiens ever got there. This makes them the absolute perfect candidates to invent tailored cold weather gear. So, tailored fitted clothing, actual sewing with structured seams, may have been pioneered by a completely different species of human long before Homo sapiens fully took over the technique and claimed it as their own.
Okay, let's pause for a second and look at what we've learned so far. Clothing starts as pure survival technology. It's about surviving the cold, dealing with lice, and global migration. There is absolutely nothing in there about shame and nothing about modesty. But here is where the story completely flips. See, once humans actually had clothing, it didn't stay purely functional for long. Archaeologists studying ancient stone garments and burial sites have found some incredible things. Decorative beads, intricate ornaments, and stitching that is far more detailed than mere survival would ever require. We're talking about sites where they find thousands of tiny, individually carved ivory beads attached to clothing, beads that would have taken hundreds and hundreds of hours to craft. This just proves that aesthetics matter deeply to early humans. Which means clothing became something else almost immediately. I mean, think about the logos, the brands, or the specific styles you wear today to show who you are, right? Well, our ancient ancestors were doing the exact same thing. Clothing became a way to show identity, status, and tribal affiliation way, way long before it ever became about modesty. That whole covering up for decency idea, that came centuries and centuries later. It's a purely social concept layered on top of something that started out as pure life-saving survival technology. So the next time someone tells you that clothing is all about modesty and decency, you have a much better story to tell them. You can tell them it's actually about ancient lice evolving in fabric, massive ice ages pushing our ancestors to the absolute brink, and a completely different, extinct species of human who figured out the genius of sewing before we even had the chance. It really makes you look at your wardrobe differently, doesn't it? So I want to know what you think. What is clothing really for today? Is it still about survival? Is it entirely about identity? Or has it evolved into something else entirely? Comment your theory below, because I really do read every single one. And make sure to subscribe to see the next explainer, because the next historical mystery we're diving into is even stranger than this one.